I think a lot of AI right now is about like, look what I did with AI, not like I'm telling a compelling story with it. That will be interesting when people get to that point where it's about the story and the narrative and other things and less about the technology.
Hello, and welcome to AI Curious. My name is Jeff Wilser. I'm a journalist, I'm a human, and I am curious about AI. So to peel back the curtain, a couple of months ago, I had the privilege of speaking at Web Summit, the flagship tech conference in London. And in the speaker's lounge, I met Eric Snowden, Adobe's Senior Vice President of Design. I quickly learned that as head of design, Eric is essentially overseeing all of the AI that goes into Adobe's many products. We chatted for around 30 minutes, no microphones, no notes, off the record, and I could have happily chatted with Eric for 5 hours. Why is that? One, Eric is an interesting, thoughtful guy. You'll see that. But two, you could argue he is at the helm of one of the most important AI projects on the planet. Millions and millions and millions of people use Adobe's tools. Adobe is how many creators create. Photoshop, Lightroom, Acrobat, just to name a few. I've used these tools myself for years. You probably have too. If you've ever edited a photo, cleaned up a PDF, built a deck for research, or shipped creative assets at scale, odds are Adobe was somewhere in the chain. And Eric's job, in many ways, is to ensure that the next era of these tools embrace AI, yes, but do it in a way that's responsible, that doesn't feel intrusive or insulting or inconsistent with the creative workflows that many of us know and love. In other words, many creators have very strong, almost emotional relationships with tools like Photoshop. We have our beloved shortcuts, our beloved workflows. So there's always a risk that too much tinkering of these tools or too much AI even could upset the base, the most loyal customers. It's a tricky balance to get right. So we get into some of the cool new AI-powered bells and whistles that Adobe is adding for creators, but beneath the product releases and feature list is a bigger question. As the tools get smarter, do we get more powerful or do we slowly hand over the wheel? Because AI for creativity can mean two very different things. It can mean shortcuts that remove drudgery while sharpening your intent. Or it can mean a future where you're mostly approving, like rubber stamping machine outputs, less maker, more passenger. To put my cards on the table, when I met Eric in Lisbon, I could tell right away that he had a deep understanding and appreciation of that core question. And he is, as you'll see, a creative at heart, and he comes at this from very much from a creator's mindset. So I wanted to dive into that in a much longer, more nuanced conversation about tools for AI and creativity. So I'm delighted that we got to do just that. And in our conversation, we kept circling back to what might be the central philosophical fight of the next decade of creative work. Not to overstate things, but that really is what's at stake. The questions of speed versus authorship, automation versus agency, convenience versus craft. And we explore, what would it look like to build AI tools that don't replace human taste, but actually make taste matter more? Eric also shares a perspective that I loved. The best AI isn't the kind that screams AI, it's the kind that quietly makes your work better, faster, and more precise while still respecting the craft, you as a human. Okay, with that preamble, here's my conversation with Eric Snowden, Senior Vice President of Design at Adobe. Eric, welcome to AI Curious.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'd love to kind of get a baseline of the kind of main new AI-ified tools that Adobe has. And I know you guys are constantly making new releases. I'm sure by the time this podcast is over, there will be 5 new Adobe announcements out there. So without giving us an exhaustive list, what are kind of the most burning, most important new AI tools you guys are really excited about?
Well, it's interesting. I think I sort of separate them into two different groups, right? There are are existing tools that people are using every day that we're injecting like helpful AI tools into. And then there are net new, brand new products that we're building on top of AI. And maybe I'll give a couple examples of both. I think in the existing tools, there's so much that we're doing inside of Photoshop. When I look at, harmonize, I think is my favorite feature that we've launched in the last couple of months. I worked as a professional retoucher. That was one of the things I forgot to add in my
Mm.
career. I was a photo retoucher for a pretty famous celebrity photographer for a while. And so the idea that I can just like put something in a photo, click a button, and I would have been able to go outside if I had this in the past. That would have been a nice thing to be able to do. Is like really an amazing thing. And so, or in Lightroom, like some of the auto culling stuff we
Yeah.
announced, like again, as someone who's working for a photographer who had to go through thousands of photos at a time to find the right photo, that would have been
Mm-hmm.
incredible. So, like these real time saving things that are geared towards helping people accomplish things. On the Acrobat side, I really look at some of the stuff we're doing around PDF spaces and being able to put a ton of documents in and get insights around all this knowledge. I mean, there's so much of the world's knowledge is locked up inside of PDFs, and we're helping people access that.
I wrote about this for Time a year ago or so. And I should fact check or recall the only, what I actually wrote, but something I was astonished to learn the statistic of how many PDFs are read or circulated per year. Do you happen to know what that is roughly? It was something like billion. It was something the order of magnitude of hundreds or millions or billions of PDFs that are being distributed and consumed every year. So, and obviously, you guys are the on ramp to consuming those for most. So, to have something that changes and speeds up how we're consuming that truly is an incredible time saver at scale.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine it's in the order of hundreds of billions of PDFs. And I don't even know that we know how many PDFs exist in the world. Like I think that's almost an impossible thing for us to even know, because they're it's an open standard. Like so many
Yeah.
people are creating them. But we have hundreds of millions of people using Acrobat every single month.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of the world's knowledge and information is
Mm.
passing through this tool. And you're not often consuming a PDF just for yourself. You're using it to understand something, to communicate with someone else, to parse through a lot of different information. You're reading a bunch of things and then making a presentation based off of it. Like, how can we help you make sense of all this information and then communicate that with someone else or make something net new off of that? There's so much we can do to help you get 80% of the way there, or in the case of sharing, to collect a bunch of information, synthesize it. I can share that synthesis with you, and then you can take that and do whatever you need with it. And so, really trying to build these productivity tools on top of, again, like an existing tool that hundreds of millions of people are using every month. Um, when it comes to new tools,
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago, we announced Project Graph, which is a node based professional creativity tool. And
What is node in this context? Can you clarify what that means? Node based?
yeah, like nodes are it's a UI paradigm where you can have basically different building blocks that you can stitch together to create new workflows. So I could drop like a Firefly node as an example that says, make text to image, and then I could drop a Photoshop node that says remove background, and I could
Mm.
connect those two things together, and I could start to create brand new workflows out of it. So as a pro or a creative technologist, I can create these pretty complicated workflows that do something brand new that couldn't be done before. And I can stitch together APIs, whether they're Adobe's or third party or a combination of them, to basically create new tools and
Can you
capabilities.
maybe give an example of kind of what that would look like, kind of concretely, of what the whole workflow is? What's possible now that was not possible before this?
Yeah, like one of the examples that we've been showing is this ad builder where at the very beginning, someone is dropping in a 2D pair of headphones from a photo. It's actually taking that 2D headphone, turning into a 3D pair of headphones. There's a node where you can actually position those headphones. It's generating a background, generating text, positioning the text,
Mm.
and then turning that entire thing into an animated advertisement with the brand's logo and then giving you 4 or 5 different versions of it.
Mm.
Um, and it's pretty incredible, like the amount of steps and different things that are being done there, going from like a 2D photo of a product all the way through to complete an ad. But the user is still in control. You still at one point can say, well, I want to position the headphones like this, or I want
Yeah.
to choose this specific thing, or I want to fork it at a certain point. Um, and the beauty is some of these node-based graphs can become pretty complicated. We can also encapsulate those into very simple UIs that you can just have a web URL that anyone can go to. So we can take this power and complexity and really simplify it down to something that like anyone can use. So we have the benefit of like depth,
Hmm.
but not everyone has to see that depth, right?
Hmm.
You can see the tip of the iceberg, or you can see the entire
Right.
iceberg, like
Right.
whatever version of that you want. And that's something I think is like really, really exciting.
Yeah. And do you have a sense, Eric, of what of all, again, probably 100 various AI use cases and kind of different tools you've built, from the flagship ones, kind of like the small under the hood new components, where are people seeing the most time saved across the Adobe ecosystem? Where you're like, oh wow, we are seeing an average of 7 hours a week saved by this. Where are we getting the most bang for the buck?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think it's going to be a little different based on your discipline, right?
Yeah.
Like, so in areas like creative production, there are things like, resizing and translating and things that
Yep.
you're doing at scale for like thousands of assets that can end up
Hmm.
saving you like an enormous amount of time. I think, like before I mentioned the sort of auto culling in Lightroom, that's a new feature that hasn't been out long enough probably for us to have data around it because we
Hmm.
just launched it. But again, having done that as a profession in the past,
Yeah.
like I'm very confident that that is going to save people like hours and hours and hours of time after a photo shoot on something that people, I don't think, is a particularly fun part of the creative process, is like trying to find that thing that you shot in the sea of other things that you shot, right? You want
Yeah.
to get to that photo, you want to edit and make that one photo from okay to great, but like sifting through all the things that you shot that weren't great is like not, at least to me, the enjoyable part of
No,
it, right?
it's hell. Anyone, even who anyone, and by this I mean everyone who has a smartphone, who has to go through their photos and like, oh shit, I took these like 87 photos
Yeah.
at
Why did I
sunset
take
last
that?
night. I only really want three. It's a pain in the ass to delete
Yeah.
the 84 you don't like. So
Yeah.
it's cool that helps with this, is I think appreciated.
Yeah.
Well, I guess let me rephrase the question. I take your point that if you're an accountant using Acrobat to understand some nuance of like a legalese contract, accounting contract. It's very different from a photographer who's working color correction. So I get there's a
Yeah.
huge range, right? I guess what I'm really after, though, at heart, stepping back a little bit, is do you have a sense of, are people using these tools, these incredible new powerful new AI tools, to create more and do different kinds of things, or to dramatically cut costs and save time, kind of creating the same amount of stuff, but using less manpower and time to do it, or having a similar amount of manpower and time, but creating a lot more stuff? Do you have any visibility to that and have a sense of how it's being used?
Yeah. I think what, I can give a couple examples. I think on our teams, what we're seeing from a content creation perspective, because I have teams under me that are creating
Hmm.
graphics, we're able to create more stuff, right? Like what we've experienced for years, and I think a lot of people resonate with this, is like the amount of things we're being asked to make is just insanely disproportionate to the amount of stuff we were able to make. Like we
Yeah.
just can't make enough stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think, once we started using Firefly for some of our generation, we were seeing like 40% improvement on like times to market on some things.
Hmm.
And so we were able to like get closer to meeting the demand our team was being asked.
Hmm.
And so for us, it was about
Yeah.
making more things. I think sometimes what we're seeing is people able to complete the job, period. Right. There are times where I look at things like some of the noise reduction stuff we have in Lightroom as another
Mhm.
example, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like the ability to actually make some content usable that wasn't usable before.
Hmm.
I look at some of the things we've done around custom models where people are able to create things that they couldn't. So some of it is about like net new things that weren't possible. And so,
Yeah.
like, I think the productivity stuff is really, really important. But I think the thing that like we often miss out on this conversation is it's also letting you do things that like you literally couldn't do before. And I think we've had a couple of demos at Max where I've actually sat down and like watched the demo and then sat down and said to myself, like, as someone who's used Adobe tools for almost 30 years, like, how would I have done that 6 months ago? And the answer was, I don't have the skills to do that.
What's your favorite
I'm like,
example? So put us in the seat
yeah,
of that demo. What's your favorite example of that?
there was a demo that one of our evangelists named Paul Tranny did at Max London this year, which I believe was in February.
Uh-huh.
And he had a photo of a woman and he was trying to composite. I think it was her and like a skeleton that was like in exactly the same position. And the skeleton was like this black, glossy, like almost like metal. But it was, and then there were like masks where like it was showing through in certain places.
Hmm.
And so I was like, okay, if I wanted to do that, I would have to have a 3D model of the skeleton. I would have to position it like perfectly in exactly the same place that she was, like light it exactly right, find the right materials, do all this stuff. And I think he also did it with another thing in the exact same position. Oh, it was also a statue in the exact same position as
Okay.
her. And I was like, I don't think I have the skills to do that in 3D. And even if I do, it would not look as good as what he did in 30 seconds on stage in front of a couple of thousand people.
Mm-hmm.
And like that was this moment where I was just like, and then he turned it into a video at the end, which I was like, I don't know how I would have done that. And so it was just like one thing after another where I was watching him do this in real time. And I was trying to think of like, could I do this? Maybe. Would it be as good? Definitely not. And how long would it take me to get to like a substandard version
Yeah.
of this?
Yeah.
And so that's where it gets really exciting for me. It's like, he was able to create something like I don't know that he would have been able to create before. But the whole time his hand was on the wheel. He was making
Right.
every single decision. It was his creative vision. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was not prompting random things, hitting a
Right.
I'm feeling lucky button and getting random stuff
You
back.
think
He
AI
he
creates? Yeah.
he had a very specific vision. It was very
Yeah.
controlled. It was all of his images as inputs and exact textures he was putting in. So it was very much a tool that he was piloting the entire time. And like very, yeah, again, it was controlled the whole time. And I think that was like one of my favorite examples of like
Mm.
somebody doing something like pretty beautiful and amazing using these tools.
You're touching on a really important point there that I want to dive into in a bit about kind of what are the appropriate guardrails, or where is it important to make sure that we are humans and that we're operating from a place of a spark of our own creativity and using
Yeah.
AI to help that, as opposed to using AI to replace that. I want to get to that in a bit, but I want to flip us a little bit. You gave an awesome example of an entirely new thing that could not be done before by AI. My guess is there are also all kinds of things you guys are quietly doing that aren't quite stage demo appropriate, that might not be as sexy on the surface, but have pretty profound implications for how people are using these tools. Can you maybe share an under the hood example or two, or what are ways that like would not make a headline? It would be a boring podcast title, hook, but actually is well, it's actually pretty important, and most people are sleeping on this kind of thing.
Well, like you say the word podcast and it makes me think of enhanced audio,
Hmm.
which I think actually is like a good hook, but like I don't know if you've used the enhanced audio feature in Adobe Podcast, but you can put a piece of audio in the tool, you hit a button, and it sounds like it was recorded in a recording
Here, my
studio.
listeners are saying, yes, Jeff, please start using this.
And I think there's something really incredible about that, right? And
Yeah.
it's something that hopefully, if you use it, nobody knows you used it. Again, it's not recording anything for you. It's not, you still have to have the performances there, but it's just taking something that you've done and making it better and giving your listeners a better experience in the end. And we had this really great demo of it at Max where the woman on stage actually recorded herself into her phone and encouraged people in the audience to talk while she was doing it. So she had 15,000 people talking in the audience while she's talking to her phone, pushed a button, cleaned up the audio, and played it back over the loudspeakers. And it sounded amazing. Like, and so
Yeah.
again, that's something like you won't even know that that happened. It's
Yeah.
not AI screaming in your face, but it is something that is going to be beneficial to the people consuming that content because it's just going to sound great.
That's a great example too of where AI is not like there's nothing that is taking away from humans. It's just kind of quietly making things better, right? I think it's really
Yeah.
hard to quantify. And and I'm not going to get in the great debate right now of is AI good or bad? How is it impacting the economy, good or bad? Impacting the workforce? I mean, that's we can actually we'll get a little bit into that on a creative sense in a bit, but I guess my point is, in those big discussions, what's often lost are the very subtle, hard to pinpoint ways that AI is kind of leveling up many of our tools, right?
Yeah.
And there's not much, it's hard to see what the downside of that is.
Yeah. Well, and I think Lightroom is a tool that is also doing a ton of AI that is basically just replacing existing tools on Lightroom with AI versions of those tools that just do a better job.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like a one-to-one replacement. Like noise reduction, which I mentioned earlier, is a good one where all of a sudden these high ISO photos that I could never use before, all of a sudden I can use them. And I push that noise reduction button. It feels like black magic. I don't know how it works. All of a sudden the photos look usable. Same thing with like adaptive presets. They're just presets that actually analyze your photo and are smarter than hitting an auto button.
Yeah.
Like these things are things I would have done before. They just work better than they used to. And so I think those are great examples of I'm producing better photos. I'm doing them the same way I would have before, but just with better results and probably a little bit faster.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like better outcomes.
Eric, one thing I'm really curious about is from your perspective as both a creative and a leader, how you approach the challenge of a kind of awesome and I would guess daunting challenge of how to reimagine these by many beloved, not just like regularly used, but the photographers, they
Yeah,
are in Photoshop all the time, right? They're living and breathing this. So you are taking these tools that creatives have been just swearing by for years or decades and looking to potentially reimagine these, right? So there's this,
yeah,
I'm guessing, a tension between you want to give them the most useful tools will likely make their jobs easier, but you also don't want to disrupt loyal users. You don't want to like shatter
yeah.
workflows. People are used to, oh, I'm used to using this command shortcut key, right? So how have you thought in the past few years about AI-ifying things, but doing it in a respectful way that is not kind of like throttling and really discombobulating your users?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the good news is we've been doing this for a while with other things before AI came around, and we have learned some important lessons through that. I think the most important one being you have to respect these workflows and how much muscle memory people have built around these tools and like what you
Totally.
can change and what you can't change, right? And
Yeah.
I feel like the sort of non-intuitive way of building professional tools is in order to make them easier to use, sometimes you have to add stuff. Like subtraction
Mm.
is not always good, right? We ran into this in Illustrator about 5 or 6 years ago. We wanted to add a properties panel, which was like, not even a new idea, but it was something that Illustrator didn't have, right? It's a
Mhm.
consolidated panel for a lot of the things that you want. So you don't have 10 different panels. And so the wrong way to do that would have been like, great, we have one panel for everything. We're getting rid of 10 panels. Congratulations, we made the app simpler.
Mhm.
That people would have showed up at our doorstep if we had done that. What we did was we created a new panel and we added the, I think, 47th panel into Illustrator, which I think people would have been like, oh my God, there's another panel. Well, at that point, whether you have 46 or 47, it doesn't matter anymore. You still have a lot. So adding one more doesn't matter. What we did was we said, like literally in the UI, we're like, there's a new way of doing things. We're making it the default. If you don't like it, click this one button, go back to the way it is.
Mhm.
But we think this is better. Try it out.
Mhm.
Most people tried it out. Most people kept it. It is one of the most used features. And no one got upset about it because we explained why it was good.
Yeah.
We made it really easy to say no to, and we didn't take away anything. And I think that's what we've been doing with these new AI tools, even in areas in Photoshop where we believe generative fill is immensely better for a lot of things than the existing tools. If you want a non AI version, like there's a little toggle, you turn it off. Right.
Mhm.
And so I think that is a really important part of the ethos is like we add something, we don't take away the old way to do it, and we give users that choice because these little changes make a big difference. People have built decades long workflows,
Yeah.
multiple monitors. We can't break those things. Little changes make a big difference. And so we just have to like be really respectful. We have to work really closely with the community on this stuff and bring them in early and often and get them into betas and get them builds and have them test this stuff and have them tell us why we're wrong about things. Like we're all creative people, especially in the design team. Like every single designer on my team has been using these tools for our entire careers, but that doesn't mean we can represent every creative person out there. It's so broad. It's like Photoshop is like a musical instrument. It really is. Like everybody uses it a little bit differently. And
Mhm.
so, if you really want to understand it, I always joke when we talk about like removing stuff from Photoshop, it's
Mhm.
always like, well, which keys on the piano don't you use
Right.
anymore? Right? It's like you can't,
Or
that's a
then
weird
also,
question.
in a way, also, I'm laughing at my earlier question to you of like, oh, how are most people using this? In a way, be asking maker of a guitar, how are most people using a guitar? Right.
Yeah,
What's
yeah, it is.
what songs are most people singing? Uh,
Yeah.
so it's on that note, though, you're in such an interesting spot in the creative world because I know from in a very different way. I've interviewed plenty of creative folks about AI over the past couple of years, in different kind of walks of life, ranging from like executives to singers, artists, and there's such um, a variety of takes on AI, even within the creative community. Right? You have a lot of creatives who were like, oh, there are some awesome tools I can use to be more creative. And you have a lot of creatives who were like, holy shit, this is going to replace us. Companies will use this to replace us. This is going to cause creativity to atrophy. And then you have people who are kind of a little bit column A, a little bit column B, who are excited about it, but also understandably, in my opinion, a little concerned as well, right? As you're creating these creative tools that are being infused with AI, how are you thinking about kind of navigating that and respecting the creative community's ethos and not this homogenous, but the kind of variety of takes there are on AI in the creative world?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a few different answers to that. I think the first one is like being, at least within the design team, being a team of creative people. It's like we're discussing this all the time and we're also
Yeah.
discussing this with the community. And we had tons of conversations about this before we ever launched any of these AI tools. And some of that was about like, what do we stand for and what do we believe and what's important to us? And I think a lot of those conversations drove the principles behind Firefly, right?
Hmm.
Making sure that we're only using content we're licensed to use.
Hmm.
That was really important,
Hmm.
right? Making sure that the content that's in our model is stuff that we know what's in our model and we have the rights to use it. That is
Yep.
different than most other companies
Yes.
because we respect creatives. that people whose content in Firefly comes from stock, they're being compensated for that, like
Yep.
creative compensation. That was
Yep.
really important to us.
Yep.
If you try, we have content authenticity, which started out um, for a lot of different reasons, but has become, I think, a very critical part of the AI story where, content authenticity is an initiative that is well beyond Adobe now, but where things that are created or edited by AI are tagged with
Yep.
this sort of immutable metadata that says what was done to the image. And
It's
we
almost
basically,
actually I wrote about this for Time actually, in one of the best innovations of the year, and I believe they describe it as a nutritional label for AI, almost saying like, okay, it's 47% protein and this
yeah,
percent AI and so on. Sorry to cut you off, but yes,
no, I love that. That's how I've been describing it for a long time. And I think I like that analogy because nutritional information isn't a judgment, right? It's just
that's right.
factual,
Yes,
right? And then you as a consumer can say like, oh, well, this is entertainment content. I don't care if it was made using AI because I'm not looking for truth. Or,
right.
oh my gosh, this was made using AI and this is a news site. Like I probably have a different opinion on
Yeah,
that than if it was on something else, right?
yeah.
Um, and I think that is an important piece of this. And what that allows us to do is a couple of different things. One is there are apps like Adobe Fresco that don't have any AI in them because a lot of illustrators are that's a community that isn't interested in AI.
Hmm.
So in Fresco, you can actually tag your content as explicitly as like created not using
Hmm.
AI
Hmm.
and use content authenticity to like stamp that on there.
Hmm.
And so that's at sort of the other end of the spectrum. And things that are tagged with content authenticity, if you try to upload that into Firefly and use as a reference image, if you said, I don't want this to be used in an image generator, we actually respect that and say, sorry, someone said you can't use this in AI. We're not going to let you do that.
Yeah.
And so there's all these different things we're doing to try to be as respectful as possible when it comes to this new world. Sort of as a creative person, the way that I've looked at this personally is, um, you know, like we are saying earlier, there's so much of this that I find, um, like sort of, at least in my opinion, very difficult to get upset about. And like, there's generative AI and utilitarian AI, and everything is sort of being lumped together right now. And the utilitarian AI has been around for a long time, and we've had AI in our tools for a decade
Sure.
plus. When you lump all that together, it all seems like it's the same. And so, again, something like a denoise filter is probably not very controversial to most people. Um, and so for the other things that might be more controversial, I think it's up to artists to figure out like, does it have a place in their workflow or not? Like,
Yeah.
and do they need to use it or not? And is it valuable to them or not? And to me as an artist, some of that I find valuable and some of it I don't. But I think I'm exploring all of it, trying it out, seeing what makes sense to me, what doesn't. There's some of that I've found valuable in my own personal workflow. Some of it I'm like, yeah, I get why someone would use this, but I don't particularly need this. And I think
Yeah.
that's up to every artist or designer to experiment and find out like what actually benefits them and what doesn't. I don't think there's going to be any sort of universals when it comes to this stuff.
I so appreciate how deeply your team is thinking about all this. And getting back to the where you're going earlier about kind of with your colleague on stage who performed that kind of dazzling trick, if you will, but the whole time he was making human decisions. It was his image. It was very much him as a human driving this. He was the engine
Yeah.
using AI as a tool. Um, and you said what he's not doing is saying pressing a button, say AI, generate awesome creative stuff, right? That's not what we
Right.
want. And it sounds like this is perhaps too simplistic, but there's a continuum where, on the one end, to your point, for years and years, there's machine learning driven stuff like kind of audio cleanup that's completely unobjectionable. On the other end of the continuum, there's a button saying, press button to create episode of The Sopranos, right? And so, have you guys, um, uh, and you're being thoughtful of creating tools that are on the right side of that, but were there things you thought about doing? Said, oh, that's actually that's too much AI, or AI is being too, that's it's giving ceding too much control to AI, that's letting AI have too heavy of a hand in creativity, right? Are there things they say, well, we'll do this, we won't do that? That's a bridge too far. Any examples of what bridges too far might look like?
Well, I think it sort of depends. Like I think there are ways to approach all of this stuff where we're still giving people control, right? Because I think
Yeah,
even when AI jumps really far ahead, people are still going to want to tweak it. It's never going to be right.
totally.
In the same way that like even if you are working with an amazing designer, a world class designer, and you give them a prompt, the thing they come back with the very first time, you're not going to be like, I'm done, right? Like it's that's just not how it works. Like
Yeah.
it's a communication, it's back and forth. Like that is a very natural part of the creative process. And so you're going to want to get under the hood. And the way that I sort of talk about a lot of AI is sort of the way I talk about self-driving cars,
Hmm.
right? Like sometimes I'm going to want it to take control, but at any time I'm going to want to be able to grab the wheel and say, stop doing this. I'm in charge. And
Yeah.
like knowing that I can do that. And so, we announced some AI stuff in Photoshop that can do some pretty powerful things, but it's manipulating the object model of Photoshop under the hood, the actual PSD the entire time.
Hmm.
And so you can have a like not quite maybe a make awesome button, but you can really tell it to do some things to your file and it'll go pretty far for you.
Hmm.
Um, you have to know what to tell it to do, which is I think that's an entire conversation of itself. Like people don't
Hmm.
know what to tell these machines to do for the most part. But even when they do, the fact that it's under the hood is giving you the optionality to say, I'm going to get rid of half that. I'm going to tweak this. I'm going to grab that slider. I'm going to do this. I think is like a really important part of this for us. Like, what we don't want to do is like obfuscate control from people. I think it's anytime we give people like simplicity
Yeah.
or the ability to jump forward, I think it should always come with, and then you can grab the wheel at any moment.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think that is the principle that's the most important for us is that combination of like power, but also control. Cause I think control and precision are what people come to Adobe for.
Hmm.
Right. Like I can go to a lot of places and type something in and hit a button and get a result that I can't like really do very much with. Like it's like a flat image. Like I don't think that's what we're about. And people come to us because they want to like noodle and get into the details. And that's what we're great at, right? And I think we want to keep leaning into that.
I love that analogy. Flipping the script a little bit from using the tools to the actual users of the tools, the creatives and designers. You kind of gave a great example before of how like yeah, it's instead of having to take if I want to take a photo of this product, you might have to do like 10,000 different angles or whatever, and it could take a day or 2 days of work. But now AI can help with that. Um, there's that. Then from a designer perspective of an ad or of a whatever it is, the tools you're building, I'm guessing will have pretty profound consequences on the workflows and even roles of designers. How are you thinking about the evolving role of designers in the AI era? Like, how will their jobs look different or careers
Yeah.
look different?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something we're like thinking about a lot. I mean, even in the context of my team, like I'm in a really interesting position where I'm a creative person. I'm running very large enterprise design team and I'm building creative tools. Like that confluence of those three things, like I don't know how many people that have that same profile as myself exist in the world. Probably I might be the only one, like very few.
I think you're one of one,
Um,
my friends. I don't think that anyone else is doing
possible
good. Yeah.
for better or for worse. And so I think, I think about that a lot with the context of my team. Like what does my design team look like a couple years from now? And I think
Yeah.
one of the things that we're doing very different, which I think is a path forward for product designers, is most designers on my team are using um, coding tools now, mostly Cursor. Um, and we're creating our own prototypes.
Hmm.
So like the line for us between designing and engineering is getting really blurry.
Is the and,
And so
sorry, is this
yeah,
what you call this vibe coding? And I'm guessing these the people who are not using codes there are folks who were not coding before that are now starting to code to
Correct.
quickly iterate on their designs and to see, does this have legs? Is there a there there?
Yeah. We're using it in a couple of different ways, and so like the approach we're taking is pretty interesting. So we've actually built some internal tools on top of Cursor to allow more people to be able to vibe code than would be able to out of the box. Because Cursor, I think they announced some interesting things this week, but prior to like literally 48 hours ago, it's not the most approachable tool in the world for designers, especially in the enterprise context. So what we've done is we built an internal tool that sits on top of Cursor that you can click a button or two and you get secure hosting, because that's very important for enterprise. We don't want our
Mhm.
prototypes floating out into the world. You get access to all of our authentication systems. It automatically hooks up to our design system. It automatically hooks up to all of our internal APIs. And what that allows the designers to do with a couple of clicks is to create a prototype that looks like an Adobe product that talks to actual Adobe APIs. So the like vibe coded things we're making are actually hitting like real Photoshop and Firefly APIs and are operating like and using the same design system as a real product. These things are very real
Wow.
feeling. And because we've taken care of a lot of like the complexity of this setup, like very non-technical people are able to use this tool. And between that and some training we've done, I think I've got almost like 300 people on my team creating these kinds of prototypes. Like there are probably very few organizations in the world that have that many people creating prototypes at this level. I'm seeing like 4 or 5 prototypes like a day coming past my
So
desk. It's like
that is
incredible.
fascinating. And just so just kind of connecting the dots, how then do you see that impacting what a designer role could look like in the future? Let's say like in
Yeah.
5 years. Yeah.
Like I think what we'll see is we'll see this bifurcation. On one end, I think we will see increased specialization where you may be the best design systems designer in the world or the best motion graphics person in the world. You'll be amazing at one thing that like really drives like influence and quality within an organization, or you're going to become very good at a lot of different things
Mm,
because AI is helping you like become very, very horizontal. Um, and so the fact that a lot of my designers are creating these prototypes, like I think that is the future. And we were literally in an executive meeting the other day where at the beginning of the meeting, the president of our business threw out a really interesting idea. I slacked one of the designers on my team. It was a day long meeting
yeah, yeah,
about
yeah.
a ton of different topics. It was like a quarterly review. I slacked one of the designers, was like, hey, he had this really cool idea. We should talk about this sometime. Before that meeting was over, he had sent me a working prototype that I got to show in the same meeting that was hitting our actual APIs and actual code. Like I showed that in that meeting, people were like, "How is this possible?" Like I could almost see like smoke coming out of people's heads, like in a good way. And so like that's the kind of thing that is, and like we could show that to people that same day.
Yeah,
Like to go from idea to showing it to customers in a day, like that's incredible.
that's
And
amazing.
we're getting to places where we're actually like forking production code and creating our own variations of things to test with users. Like the compression of like idea to execution is getting like very interesting with some of these tools.
So on that note, Eric, last question for you. Given
Yeah.
one of your roles is leading this massive organization, when you have so clearly you have imbued it with this kind of this AI progressive AI experimentation, exploring and trying different things, iterating. What advice do you give to leaders for successfully implementing AI solutions? Because so many businesses are struggling with this.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think one of the successes, like if I reverse engineer the success we've had this year, part of it was at the beginning of the year, I was looking at the OKRs for our organization and we had like a list of them. I said, we only have two. And one of them is AI adoption. We're going to make it so focused that it's impossible to ignore. We're going to make it this drumbeat of things we talk about every year. We're going to make it like practical and have like trainings and explain why. We're going to show examples. And at every all hands meeting, we're going to show like, look at the cool stuff people are making with it, make it practical. So I think sometimes people are like, yeah, I would love to learn how to vibe code, but like, what am I doing with it? Right. Like they need to see those examples and sort of be led along the way. And then I think for us, it was when we realized there were roadblocks in the way, again, like things like secure hosting. I'm like, oh, I don't know how to hook this up to our APIs. And I don't know how to like hook this up into our internal sign-in system. I'm a designer. That seems like really difficult. We use the small amount of engineering resources we have in our design organization to build that at scale to solve that for our entire
Mm.
team. And so putting dedicated resources to like removing roadblocks, that was probably like the biggest unlock for us to say, I'm going to sacrifice a couple of resources for 6 months because that's going to unlock 300 people creating prototypes that wouldn't have been able to do it. And so I think it was a combination of like saying this is important, reinforcing that training, and then putting actual humans against it to say, like, it is your job to help unblock the rest of the team. And you combine all those things together, and all of a sudden, your team is changing how they work.
I love that. Okay, actual real quick last question for you,
Yeah, go for
lightning style.
it.
Without stealing the thunder from any future product launches, although feel free to drop some ideas. How are you envisioning the future of kind of AI powered creative tools? I'm guessing in many ways we're at the early innings here, right? What could this
Yeah.
look like in 5 years, hell, 10 years? You must have thoughts about where this is all headed to.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think for us, the thing that we're really leaning into, which I've talked about a little bit, is that control aspect, right? Like, how do you more directly communicate your intent? And I think
Right.
about like the way that I would communicate something with you. Like, sometimes I might text you, sometimes I might talk to you, sometimes I might draw you a picture and show it to you. Sometimes I might show you, you might show me a photo and I might sketch on top of it. Like there's so many different ways that like humans communicate intent. How do we have like AI based versions of that? Like how do we bring those communication methodologies to like human computer interaction? I think is really interesting because right now it's like so much of it is still like text based, which is like if you go into a creative studio, like people are like not typing back and forth to each other. You see them up on a whiteboard most of the time, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just think there are different ways for us to communicate intent, and we're like the early like innings of
Yeah.
that. And then I also think like weaving this together um in a way that like what is AI, what isn't, like does it matter anymore? I think there's this line between this is AI produced and this is like not AI. And like I don't think that is going to be like as important in the future. I think
Hmm.
you see a lot of people making completely AI generated stuff or like things with no AI. And I think I don't know that that bifurcation is going to like matter in the future. Right. Like I think it's going to get blended together in a much more interesting way where you don't know and you don't like care all that much. And it's going to be about the story. I think a lot of AI right now is about like, look what I did with AI, not
Yeah.
like I'm telling a compelling story with it.
Yeah.
Right. And like people are going to tell compelling stories with it. And I
Yeah.
think that will be interesting when people get to that point where it's about the story and the narrative and other things and less about the technology. Like we talked about this at the beginning, like I accidentally work at a technology company. I'm a creative person. And like, I can't wait till we stop talking about the technology and start talking about like the stories people are trying to tell and what people are trying to communicate and like the beautiful, amazing things people are putting out into the world. And like, the sooner we get to that, like the happier I'm going to be.
I love it. Well, Eric, I could talk to you about this for hours and hours and hours, but you've got probably 10 more product launches to go to go knock out. So I'll let you go. But thank you, sir. Really enjoyed this as a lifelong Adobe user. It's a lot of fun. So thank you very much and best of luck to you guys going forward.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it. Thanks again to Eric Snowden, Senior Vice President of Design at Adobe. Thank you also to our producer, Jasper Chua. And thank you to you, dear listener. If this is your first time at AI Curious, please consider subscribing. We're at Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all the usual suspects. Rate it 5 stars and leave a review. Thanks again, and see you next time.